All right, so Unit 3, like I said, is all about editing and manipulation. So we are going to use Photoshop. I have Photoshop on one of my computers in the classroom for you to use. If you have Photoshop available at home, that's great. You can definitely use it. But there are other free programs like Pixlr or GIMP that you can run right on your Chromebooks. But they're all kind of based on Photoshop. Photoshop is kind of like the default program for photo editing. So we're going to just watch a short little clip that kind of goes a little quickly, but it shows you some kind of history and background of Photoshop. Okay. So Photoshop was one of the first programs to edit pictures, and it edits pictures based on kind of a raster graphics editor, which means instead of looking at the picture and saying, oh, it's a beautiful picture of a cat or a flower, it's all it's doing is breaking the picture down into individual pixels and allowing you to edit and manipulate pixel by pixel. So it started in the late 80s. It didn't become widely available until the 90s. And by like the early 2000s, it was really the industry standard. All graphic designers and photographers really need to be able to work in the Photoshop environment. Even now, where we have free programs, they're all based on the tools in Photoshop. So they're kind of like free knockoff versions of what Photoshop originally created. So it does really help if you know Photoshop itself, so you can use some of the other free programs. So originally Photoshop came out every few years, they'd come up with a newer version, and those were all numbered versions 1 through 7. And then they started coming out with packaging all of their programs together. So Adobe also, in addition to making Photoshop, makes other programs that graphic designers use like InDesign and um, Illustrator and Dreamweaver and all these other kind of programs that you can use to for graphic design purposes or for web design. And they started packaging them in these creative suites that started becoming numbered as CS2, CS3, all the way up to CS 2007. And then they kind of stopped that because every year people were having to spend thousands of dollars on buying new software, and it became very expensive. So they changed their whole model, and instead of going to the store and buying like a box set of software, you actually use a subscription-based cloud service. So that's why they now refer to the different models as CC. So you pay a subscription, like to use Photoshop monthly. So if you're a student, I think you can get a student subscription for about $20 a month, and you don't have to, instead of shelling out hundreds of dollars or even thousands of dollars for the newest software every year, you just pay a monthly fee, and it's updated all the time. So you're always working with the latest version. And because it exists in the cloud, it can run much easier on your computer. Photoshop files have a file extension .psd. So that's really important to know. We're going to talk a little bit more about file types and what different file types are best used for in a minute. So I have this funny little news clip from like the early 90s where the Photoshop programmers are on the Today Show, and they're going to do a little demo of their software and kind of have a discussion about the ethics of photo manipulation, which I think is also really relevant to kind of this unit.
A picture may no longer be worth 1,000 words. These days, the picture that the camera takes may well not be the picture that we end up seeing in newspapers and magazines. Technology makes it difficult, maybe even impossible, to tell what's real and what's not. Recently, the issue of altering photographs came up when Playboy added its logo to a picture of Rosanna Arquette without her knowledge or her approval. And then there was a huge publicity outcry last year when TV Guide tacked Oprah Winfrey's head onto Anne Margaret's body. Russell Brown is a senior art director of Adobe Systems, a computer software company. He's busy at work today, saying that with the right equipment, he can manipulate just about everything. You're already starting to manipulate photos. Good morning.
It's an early morning to get going.
You are not a photographer.
No, I'm not.
You're a graphic artist.
Yes.
And yet you have taken photography as the medium in which you've been able to do some of your most interesting work.
Oh, yeah, I see the computer is a wonderful tool for graphic artists, and I wouldn't live without it. It's just a must.
Can you show us some of the things that can be done?
Yes, we'll show you the most unethical situation.
Okay.
We'll take the shot of the Nancy and Ron, and I'm going to place myself into this photograph, and using this type of technology, you can easily get things to pop right in.
And in this case, you're going to become the third member of the party.
Yes. So let's just paste in.
While you do this, this is something that you're doing for fun, and you can continue punching your buttons that you need to do while we watch the photo come up.
Mm-hmm.
One thing to do it for fun, another thing to change the photo itself, and there you are.
And then I can pop yourself right in and hide these edges. Oh.
Now, why would you want to do this?
Why would you want to throw the... Yeah.
While you're messing with the computer, let me go ahead and take a minute to introduce our other guests. Fred Ritchen is an author who has written a book entitled In Our Own Image. It is one in which Fred is over here. It's one in which, this is Rick Smolin, who has written a series of books too. The Day in the Life of America series is your work. And Fred has written a book entitled In Our Own Image, a book in which you warn against the dangers of what people like Russell do. What's so bad about monkeying with the photograph and putting himself with Ronnie and Nancy?
Well, the thing is that photographs we still tend to believe as a society. If an eyewitness says they saw something, we might say maybe they're wrong, maybe a government denies it. It's one person's word against another. But when you see a photograph, you really tend to believe it, that something happened. And I think that document in our society is extraordinarily important. And when people start monkeying with photographs, you don't know which photographs are real, which ones happened, which didn't. And you think, for example, of Tiananmen Square, the Chinese government said nothing happened, and the photograph said, no, there was a massacre.
Mm-hmm.
People said, yes, there was a massacre, a photograph against a government, and the photograph won. And
your concern is that the photographs can be doctored by the masses or by the government?
My concern is that if the media takes to doing what Russell is demonstrating now, that people, the public, will begin to disbelieve photographs generally, and it won't be as effective and powerful a document of social communication as it has been for the last 150 years.
Rick, you buy that?
Well, I mean, I think that every time there's a new technology like this, there are a lot of ethical questions which have to be answered. I think the first thing that happens is that the artists, the creative people, wow, Russell and his company have invented Photoshop. Let's play with it. Let's see what's going to happen. And examples of that were the cover of A Day in Life of America, where we moved somebody on a horse, the National Geographic.
Well, let's
moved
take a look at
pyramids.
some of those while you talk, I think, and I'll just ask the guys in the control room to go ahead and punch up some of the pictures that we've got, and we'll just discuss them as they come up, and let's talk about what's good, what's bad. Our first one is the cover of the book, and you have actually moved this fellow.
Right. The problem is we had 250,000 pictures taken on this one day, but nothing worked as a cover. This was a beautiful picture, but the horse was actually further down that same hill. So we slid the horse up the hill. I don't know if that's ethically correct or not. I do know as a book publisher, when I'm trying to capture someone's attention in a bookstore, I'm trying to make the image very graphic very quickly.
Take the book publisher hat off and put your photographer hat on, though.
Well,
is it right?
That's a very good question, and an even better question is what if the cowboy was from one photographer and the tree was from another photographer, and the third person actually combined the two images? This is something Russell and I talk about all the time. Who owns the image? Who has the copyright?
Let's continue looking at some more. Fred, this is one that you thought National Geographic shouldn't have done.
Well, this was originally a horizontal photograph, and they also, like Rick, needed a vertical image for the cover. And what they did was they rotated the pyramids to get it on a vertical back in 1982, which caused a big outcry in the photographic circles. And the feeling was you can go back in time and move a photographer a few feet to one side, but the image comes out in a different way. The idea of a photograph is it's taken at a certain instant, and you're not supposed to be able to go back in time and move the photographer a few feet to one side. That's against what we think of photography as being.
How do you respond to these kinds of arguments, Russell?
As a graphic artist, I see this as a tool that I have, and I would never give it up. It's something I'm going to have and always use, but I'm going to be very ethical with it.
Now, I would have thought that I could have gone back an original picture of Nancy and Ron and realized that, of course, you, Russell, were not in the photo, but you can create a negative from this.
Yes, if based upon the skill of the artist using the program, they can give the illusion that the photograph is quite real and make a negative.
It's a frightening possibility, and
Yes.
I think we want to talk more about it later. We're out of time
I think you
today.
should tell your audience that you can do this for $800 now. It used to cost $1 million 2 years ago.
So anybody can do
With a
it.
Macintosh and Photoshop, that's all you need.
We have met the enemy, and he may
It's
be
here to
us.
stay.
Okay. Russell Brown, Rick Smolin, and Fred Richin, thanks to all of you for being with us.
Thank you.
We'll be back in just a moment talking with Jim Fowler in the zoo in a moment. And then coming up in our second hour this morning,
So definitely a whole different time, right? These were created, and it really scared people. I think we've kind of forgotten that discussion about, is it right to edit photos? And we just kind of assume now that photos are going to be edited all the time, right? Do you guys think it was interesting, or do you have any comments or questions about kind of this topic? No? Okay. We'll talk about this more certainly as we kind of get underway with this unit.